city block in Philadelphia, 1972. A horn section warming up behind a chain-link fence. A producer in Memphis bleeding reverb into a vocal booth, built from mattress foam. In Detroit, a songwriter scribbling paranoia into a lyric sheet because the streets outside feel like they're on fire.
Kiss my window.
This was the decade black music stopped asking for permission. It stopped waiting to be let in the door and started building its own house, one session, one stubborn producer at a time. Welcome to R&B Pulse Track, where we go past the charts and into the rooms where soul was actually built. These are the true stories behind the songs that made the 70s the greatest decade music has ever known. Number 12, Smiling Faces. Sometimes the Undisputed Truth, 1971.
Smiling faces, sometimes.
By 1971, Motown wasn't just a hit factory churning out love songs for teenagers anymore. It was starting to reflect the fear running underneath Black America, a mood far removed from the label's early, sunnier singles. Producer Norman Whitfield had already pushed the Temptations toward psychedelic soul, and now he handed a warning disguised as a groove to a lesser-known group called The Undisputed Truth, betting that their unfamiliarity would make the message land harder.
Smiling faces sometimes.
The song was built on a single, unsettling idea. The people smiling in your face are the ones most likely to do you wrong. Whitfield layered wah-wah guitar, ghostly strings, and a bass line that crept rather than bounced, turning paranoia into something you could actually dance to, without ever losing the unease underneath it.
Hey, they don't tell the truth. Smiling.
The session took place at Motown's Hitsville studio, where Whitfield pushed the group through take after take, chasing a vocal delivery that sounded uneasy rather than smooth. He reportedly wanted the singers to sound like they were watching their backs mid-performance, not simply entertaining an audience in a booth. It only reached number 63 on the pop charts for The Undisputed Truth, a commercial disappointment by Motown's usual standards. But that almost didn't matter. The Temptations' own extended cover the following year became a landmark of the genre, proof that Whitfield had tapped into something real, a decade where trust itself had started to feel dangerous.
No traces of the evil that lurks.
Smiling Faces sometimes captured a mood most artists were too afraid to name out loud. It's the sound of Motown growing up, trading romance for reality, and setting the tone for everything psychedelic soul would become for the rest of the decade to follow. Number 11, Lowrider, War, 1975. War wasn't a typical R&B group. They were Black, Latino, and white musicians from Long Beach, California, playing funk that sounded like the freeway itself. All momentum and heat shimmer under a Southern California sun. By 1975, they'd already scored several hits and built a loyal, racially mixed following. But nothing quite like what was about to come out of a loose, half-serious rehearsal session in a cramped room. Lowrider started as a jam built around a single, hypnotic bass line from bassist B.B. Dickerson, locked to a Latin-tinged shuffle that felt more like a street corner than a studio. Saxophonist Charles Miller improvised the now iconic riff almost by accident during that rehearsal, and the band knew instantly, without needing to discuss it, that they had something the streets of Los Angeles would claim as their own. The recording leaned on live interplay rather than studio polish or heavy overdubbing. War tracked largely in one another's presence, trading phrases back and forth until the groove locked into place naturally, a looseness that gave the final track its unmistakable street-level authenticity and unhurried swagger throughout. The song became an anthem for Chicano lowrider culture in Southern California almost immediately after release, a genuine crossover moment where funk, soul, and Latin rhythm fused into something entirely new and difficult to classify. It reached number 7 on the R&B charts and became one of the most sampled grooves in music history. Lowrider proved that 70s R&B wasn't confined to Detroit, Philly, or Memphis. Los Angeles was quietly building its own sound in the background, one that reflected the city's multicultural reality and expanded what R&B could even mean going forward into the disco era. Number 10, Papa Was a Rolling Stone, The Temptations, 1972.
It was the 3rd of September.
By 1972, The Temptations had already lived several lives inside Motown's walls, cycling through lineup changes and shifting fashions along the way. Doo-wop harmony kings first, then the label's most sophisticated vocal group, constantly reinventing themselves to survive a rapidly changing decade around them. Producer Norman Whitfield wanted them to become something else entirely. Storytellers for a genre he was essentially inventing in real time, one that could carry genuine narrative weight rather than simple hooks.
That day I'll always remember. Yes, I will.
Papa Was a Rolling Stone began as a nearly 12-minute studio epic, built on a bass line from James Jamerson that seemed to breathe on its own, strings that swelled like a full film score, and a story told from the perspective of children slowly learning the hard, disappointing truth about their absent father, piece by piece. Whitfield insisted the instrumental introduction stay fully intact, even against Motown's own commercial instincts and internal pushback, stretching the single version past 6 minutes when radio programmers wanted something closer to 3. Engineers reportedly fought him hard on the runtime, convinced no station would ever agree to play the full thing. It won 3 Grammy Awards and became one of the definitive texts of psychedelic soul, proving that black music could be cinematic, morally complicated, and commercially massive, all at the exact same time. The single hit number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts within weeks of its release. The song's influence would echo for decades afterward, into hip-hop sampling, into concept albums, into every artist who ever tried to tell a hard truth over a groove, instead of tiptoeing around one. Detroit had shown the entire industry that soul music could carry real literature within it. Number 9, Love Train. Philadelphia, in the early 70s, had its own distinct sound, built inside Sigma Sound Studios by songwriters and producers Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, 2 men obsessed with turning R&B into something closer to a full orchestral experience than a simple 3-minute single. Where Motown had assembly line precision honed over a decade, Philadelphia International had orchestral ambition instead, and the OJs quickly became its first great voice on record. Love Train was written as something almost radical for its era, a plea for global unity, name-checking Russia, China, Egypt, and Israel in the very same verse, right at the height of Cold War tension between nations. It was an unusually bold, unapologetically political lyric to build a joyful dance record around. Gamble and Huff built it on the shoulders of MFSB, the studio's celebrated in-house orchestra of session musicians, layering strings and horns until the track felt less like a song and more like a full-scale movement gathering momentum with every passing bar. It became the OJ's only number 1 pop hit of their entire career, and it turned Philadelphia International into a genuine commercial rival to Motown itself, almost overnight, proving that Philly could produce records with the same emotional sweep as a full symphony orchestra standing directly behind the singers. Love Train wasn't just a hit for one group. It was a statement of purpose for an entire label and an entire city's sound, one that would go on to define the mid-70s and quietly lay the groundwork for disco itself in the years that followed its release. The song's optimism, arriving amid a decade full of tension, gave listeners something rare, a genuine, danceable vision of a better world, delivered without irony. Number 8, If You Don't Know Me By Now, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, 1972. Teddy Pendergrass wasn't originally the lead singer of the Blue Notes at all. He started out behind the drum kit, keeping time for other people's spotlight moments night after night on the club circuit around Philadelphia. But when Harold Melvin heard what Pendergrass could do with a ballad during a rehearsal, he moved him to the front of the stage, and Philadelphia Soul found its most powerful voice almost overnight, seemingly out of nowhere. Gamble and Huff wrote If You Don't Know Me, by Now, as a quiet storm ballad before the genre even had a name, a slow-building meditation on a relationship strained by silence and misunderstanding, rather than any single dramatic betrayal or affair. Pendergrass sang it not with technical flash but with aching restraint, letting the pain sit in the pauses between phrases rather than rushing through them toward a big finish. Producers reportedly kept the arrangement deliberately sparse in the mix, trusting his voice alone to carry the song's full emotional weight from start to finish. The song reached number 3 on the pop charts and number 1 on the R&B charts, becoming the group's defining signature record and firmly establishing Pendergrass as one of the most emotionally commanding vocalists of his entire generation of singers to emerge from Philadelphia. It's a song that helped define what soul balladry would become for the remainder of the decade, intimate and unhurried, setting the template for the quiet storm sound that would dominate late-night radio programming well into the 80s and beyond, long after Pendergrass moved on to a solo career of his own. Few ballads from the era have aged as gracefully, still turning up in weddings and quiet moments 5 decades later. Number 7, I'll Be Around, The Spinners, 1972. The Spinners had spent most of the 60s as Motown afterthoughts, buried behind the label's bigger, better promoted acts, and rarely given a proper single or real promotional push of their own. When they finally left for Atlantic Records in 1972, producer Tom Bell, one of Philadelphia's true architects, saw an opportunity nobody else at either label had bothered to notice yet. I'll Be Around was reportedly written in under an hour, built on a jazz-inflected guitar riff and a lead vocal from Philippe Wynne that felt conversational, almost improvised, like a man genuinely talking a woman through heartbreak in real time, rather than performing at her from a stage. Bell's arrangement wrapped the track in warm strings and understated horns. A world away from Motown's tighter, punchier house style, the group had spent years trapped inside without much room to breathe. The session musicians reportedly cut the entire basic track in a single, unhurried afternoon at Sigma Sound Studios in downtown Philadelphia, working almost entirely off feel rather than a rigid chart. It became the group's breakthrough hit, hitting number 1 on the R&B charts, and proving that Philadelphia's lush, sophisticated sound could resurrect a career Motown had essentially let go cold years earlier without much notice. The Spinners' reinvention became one of the era's great redemption stories in R&B, a reminder that the right city, the right producer, and the right song could completely rewrite an overlooked artist's fortune almost overnight, seemingly out of nowhere. The group would go on to record hit after hit with Bell throughout the decade, cementing Philadelphia's reputation as a place where careers were quietly resurrected. If you're just finding us, we're halfway through the decade that changed everything, and there's a lot more history where this came from. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive into the songs and stories that built modern music. Now, back to 1971, where Northern California was about to redefine what funk could sound like. Number 6, Family Affair, Sly and the Family Stone, 1971. By 1971, Sly Stone was retreating from the optimism that had made Sly and the Family Stone icons of the late 60s counterculture and festival stages. Holed up in a rented house in Bel Air, surrounded by paranoia, drugs, and armed associates coming and going at all hours of the night, he began building an album that would become as unsettling as it was genuinely groundbreaking for the genre as a whole. Family Affair was recorded almost entirely by Sly alone, using a primitive drum machine, the Maestro Rhythm King, years before drum machines became common anywhere in R&B production circles. The murky, hazy production wasn't a mistake or a limitation. It was the deliberate sound of a man retreating from the world around him.
And cry, 'cause you look broke down, but you're crying anyway.
He layered vocals and instruments in isolation rather than with his full band present in the room, reportedly recording different parts on entirely different days, as collaborators drifted in and out of the sessions without much warning or any real structure to speak of.
Another child grows up to be.
The song became Sly and the Family Stone's biggest hit of their career, reaching #1 on both the pop and R&B charts, even as it described a family fracturing rather than unifying, a stark reversal from the band's earlier anthems of pure, unguarded togetherness.
'Cause you're all broke down, it's a family affair.
Family Affair quietly reshaped funk's future forever. That drum machine sound would echo through disco, through hip-hop, through decades of black music yet to come, one man's private isolation becoming an unlikely blueprint for an entire industry. It remains one of the earliest examples of a black artist essentially producing an entire hit record alone, in near total seclusion, and having the world catch up to it anyway. Number 5, I Can't Stand the Rain, Ann Peebles, 1973.
Bringing back sweet memories.
Memphis had Stax, but it also had High Records, a smaller, tighter operation built around producer Willie Mitchell's near obsession, with warm, minimal arrangements and unusually close vocal miking techniques he'd developed himself. Ann Peebles was one of High's most gifted vocalists, and in 1973, working closely with Mitchell, she helped invent a sound that was genuinely years ahead of its time. The story goes that Peebles was watching rain fall outside a hotel window one evening, thinking about a relationship that was slowly fading around her, when the idea for the song came to her almost fully formed on the spot. She brought the concept back into the studio the very next day. In the studio, Mitchell and his engineers used a mellotron and a primitive Syndrome-style device to mimic the actual sound of raindrops, an early, homemade drum machine effect that gave the finished track an eerie, electronic pulse, unlike almost anything else on the radio at that time. I Can't Stand the Rain only reached number 6 on the R&B charts, a modest hit by the standards of the day, but it became one of the most sampled and covered soul records of the entire decade, later reinterpreted by artists ranging from Tina Turner all the way to Missy Elliott decades on.
It used to be.
The song is a reminder that some of the 70s most forward-thinking production came not from major labels with big budgets, but from small studios in Memphis, quietly chasing a sound nobody else had even thought to try yet. Mitchell's homemade approach to electronic texture would quietly influence producers for decades, long before synthesizers became standard in every studio. Number 4, Betcha by Golly, Wow, The Stylistics, 1972.
There's a spark of magic in you.
Tom Bell had a gift for writing arrangements around a voice rather than through it, and few voices suited that gift better than Russell Tompkins Jr.'s soaring, delicate falsetto sitting above the mix. With The Stylistics, Bell and lyricist Linda Creed built some of the most tender, orchestrated ballads of the entire decade, one right after another, with barely a misstep. Betcha by Golly, Wow began life as a Motown demo before Bell reshaped it entirely for Philadelphia's more orchestral sensibility, wrapping Tompkins' falsetto in strings so lush the arrangement nearly became a second lead vocal in its own right, sitting right alongside him. Creed's lyrics leaned into pure, unguarded romantic wonder, a stark contrast to the era's growing appetite for social commentary and protest music playing on the radio around it. Bell reportedly rehearsed the string sections separately for hours before ever bringing the vocalist into the room to sing.
Each time you smile.
The song reached number 3 on the pop charts, becoming one of the definitive early examples of the quiet storm sound that would soon come to dominate late-night radio programming across the entire country for years afterward.
Rainbows in your favorite shade.
The stylistics prove that amid a decade of protest anthems and gritty funk, there was still commercial and artistic room for pure, unapologetic tenderness, soul music's softer register, sung by one of the most technically gifted voices to emerge from the era. Their run of ballads with Belle became a quiet counterweight to the decade's louder, angrier statements, proving softness could sell just as well. Number 3. Rock Your Baby, George McCrae, 1974. George McCrae wasn't even supposed to be the one singing this song at all. In a small Miami studio in 1974, producers Harry Wayne Casey and Richard Finch had written a track originally intended for McCrae's wife, Gwen, a rising singer in her own right at the time. When she wasn't available that particular day, George stepped up to the microphone almost as an afterthought instead, filling in on short notice. Built on a simple, insistent drum machine pattern and a sparse, four-on-the-floor rhythm, Rock Your Baby became something almost nobody had heard before on the radio. A sound too electronic to be pure soul, and too soulful to be pure pop at the exact same time. Casey and Finch had, largely by accident, helped invent disco in that small Miami studio, without fully realizing what they'd stumbled onto. The vocal was reportedly recorded in just a couple of quick takes, with McCrae's relaxed, almost understated delivery becoming a defining part of the finished track's lasting appeal, contrasting sharply with the machine-like rhythm underneath him. The song exploded to number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts and sold over 11 million copies worldwide, becoming one of the single biggest selling records of the entire decade in the process, across nearly every market. Rock Your Baby marked a real turning point for R&B. The moment the genre's rhythmic DNA began fusing with the electronic pulse that would define the back half of the 70s, sending soul music straight onto the dance floor for good. Every disco record that followed, in some small way, owed a debt to that accidental Miami session. Number 2. Fight the Power, The Isley Brothers, 1975.
Time is truly wasted.
By 1975, the Isley Brothers had already survived multiple reinventions across nearly 2 decades in the business. Doo-wop, Motown, and psychedelic rock guitar, courtesy of a young Jimi Hendrix, who'd once played in their touring band as a session guitarist, before finding solo fame of his own soon after. Now, with Fight the Power, they turned their sound decisively toward outright confrontation. Built around a hard-driving funk groove and Ernie Isley's searing, Hendrix-influenced guitar work, the track's lyrics addressed institutional racism directly. So directly that radio stations initially balked at broadcasting the song's uncensored language on air at all. The band refused to soften any of it for airplay or radio edits, standing firm even as programmers pushed back on the language. Reports from the sessions describe Ernie Isley cutting his guitar solo in a single take, deliberately chasing a raw, unpolished tone that matched the song's confrontational spirit, instead of smoothing it out for easier, more radio-friendly consumption. Fight the Power reached number 1 on the R&B charts and number 4 on the pop charts, proving that unapologetic political funk could still dominate mainstream radio playlists, even in the mid-70s. The song's legacy would stretch far beyond its own decade, its title and defiant spirit echoing years later through hip-hop, most famously inspiring Public Enemy's own landmark anthem of the exact same name a decade later. Few funk records from the 70s carried their politics so plainly, or aged into an anthem so completely. Number 1, Love's Theme, Love Unlimited Orchestra, 1973. Barry White had already built a solid reputation as a songwriter and producer, with a gift for lush, symphonic arrangements behind other singers on other people's records for several years. In 1973, working in Los Angeles with a 40-piece orchestra, under the name Love Unlimited Orchestra, he attempted something almost nobody in R&B had ever seriously tried before him. He released an entirely instrumental record and simply let it speak for itself, with no vocal to lean on and nothing to hide behind if it failed. Love's theme was built on a sweeping string arrangement, a driving bass line, and a rhythm section that pulsed with an almost hypnotic four-on-the-floor insistence running underneath the whole arrangement from start to finish. There were no lyrics, no vocalist, nothing but pure orchestral groove. And it became a genuine sensation anyway. White reportedly conducted the massive session himself, layering strings take after take, until the arrangement felt completely alive and fully realized in the room. The track reached #1 on the pop charts, an almost unheard of achievement for a purely instrumental R&B record at the time. And it's now widely credited as one of the very first true disco records ever to top the national charts. Love's theme sits at #1 on this list because it captures everything the decade was building toward: orchestral ambition, rhythmic innovation, and the unstoppable pull toward the dance floor that would come to define R&B's entire next chapter. It's the sound of the 70s exhaling into the future, an ending that quietly became a beginning for everything disco would become. These 12 songs weren't just hits, they were arguments. That black music could be political and romantic, electronic and orchestral, painful and joyful, sometimes all within the same 3 minutes. Everything that came after was built on foundations poured in the 70s by artists who refused to make music small. If this journey moved you, subscribe to R&B Pulse Track for more true stories behind the legends of R&B and soul.